3 German shepherds was left alone in an empty yard. What baby did, next left. Everyone in tears. The morning Marcus found the dogs, nobody believed what would happen next. Before we begin this incredible story, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. 5-year-old Marcus pressed his small face against the chain-link fence, his breath creating tiny clouds in the cold morning air. 3 German shepherds lay motionless in the yard next door, their bodies so still that for a terrifying moment he thought they weren't breathing. The house behind them stood empty, windows dark, grass growing wild through cracks in the concrete. "Mama won't believe this," Marcus whispered to himself, his fingers gripping the cold metal links. The biggest dog, a massive male with a scar running down his muzzle, lifted his head slightly at the sound of Marcus's voice. His eyes weren't angry or mean, like everyone said German shepherds were supposed to be. They were something else entirely, something that made Marcus's chest hurt in a way he couldn't explain. The dog's tail moved once, not a wag, just a single weak movement that seemed to say, "I see you," before his head dropped back down to the dirt. Marcus had been watching these dogs for 3 days now, ever since the moving truck had pulled away from the house and never come back. 3 days since anyone had given them food or water. 3 days since their owner, Mr. Garrett, had simply vanished without a word. Marcus knew he should tell his mother. He knew he should call for help. But something about the way the neighbors talked about these dogs stopped him. "Those beasts are dangerous," Mrs. Coleman had said just yesterday, peering over her fence with disgust. "Better off if animal control takes them away." But Marcus had seen something the adults hadn't. He'd seen the smallest dog, a female with gentle brown eyes, trying to share the last drops of water from a cracked bowl with the other 2. He'd seen them huddled together during the thunderstorm 2 nights ago, protecting each other from the rain. "Hey," Marcus called softly through the fence. "Are you hungry?" The middle dog, lean and alert despite his obvious hunger, raised his ears at Marcus's voice. There was intelligence in those eyes, an understanding that went beyond simple animal instinct. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the peanut butter sandwich his mother had packed for his snack. Without hesitation, he broke it into 3 pieces and pushed them through the fence. The dogs didn't rush forward like starving animals might. Instead, the largest one nudged the smallest forward first, letting her eat before taking his share. The middle dog waited until both others had eaten before accepting his portion, taking it so gently from near Marcus's fingers that the boy felt no fear at all. "You're not mean," Marcus said, wonder filling his voice. "You're just sad." That's when he heard the rumble of an engine. A white van with County Animal Control painted on the side was pulling up to the abandoned house. Marcus's heart started racing as 2 men got out, one carrying a long pole with a loop on the end, the other holding what looked like a cage. "No," Marcus breathed, his small hands shaking. He knew what happened to dogs that went to animal control, especially big dogs that nobody wanted. His friend Tommy had told him they only kept them for 7 days before they went to sleep forever. The men were walking toward the gate of the abandoned yard, their faces set with the grim determination of people doing an unpleasant job. The dogs had noticed them too. The largest male had struggled to his feet, placing himself between the men and the 2 other dogs. Not aggressively, just protectively. His legs shaking from weakness, but his stance firm. "Looks like 3 of them," the taller man said, rattling the gate. "Probably been abandoned for a while. They look pretty rough." "German shepherds too," the other replied. "Those are always hard to place." Might as well just. He didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. His eyes filled with tears as he watched the men preparing their equipment. Without thinking, without planning, Marcus did something that would change everything. He ran. Not away from the danger, but straight toward it. His small legs carried him around the fence to the gate of the abandoned yard. Before the animal control officers could stop him, Marcus had slipped through the gap in the gate and was standing between the men and the dogs. "You can't take them!" Marcus shouted, his voice high and desperate. "They're not bad dogs. They're just hungry." The officers exchanged glances, clearly not expecting to deal with a child. "Son, you need to get away from those animals," the taller one said carefully. "They could be dangerous. They haven't been fed properly, and scared dogs can bite." "They won't bite me," Marcus said firmly, and to prove his point, he turned and walked straight to the largest dog, the one with the scar. The animal control officers tensed, ready to intervene, but what happened next stopped them cold. The massive German shepherd, despite his hunger and fear, lowered his head and gently pressed it against Marcus's small chest. The boy wrapped his thin arms around the dog's neck, and the animal's tail began to wag weakly, as if remembering what happiness felt like. "See?" Marcus said through his tears. "He's not mean." None of them are mean. They're just scared and alone. The second officer had pulled out his phone, probably to call for backup or Marcus's parents, but he paused when the smallest dog limped forward and sat beside Marcus, leaning against his leg. The middle dog joined them, forming a protective circle around the small boy. "How long have they been alone?" the taller officer asked, his voice softer now. 3 days, Marcus replied, his hand stroking the scarred dog's matted fur. "Mr. Garrett just left them. I've been watching them through the fence. They share everything, even when there's not enough. They take care of each other." Sarah Chen had been having her morning coffee when she noticed the animal control van next door. Her son Marcus had been acting strange for days, sneaking extra food from the kitchen, spending hours by the fence. Now, looking out her window, she saw him in the abandoned yard with 3 large dogs and 2 uniformed officers. Her first instinct was panic. She dropped her mug, not even noticing as it shattered on the kitchen floor, and ran outside. But as she approached the fence, she heard Marcus's voice, steady and clear despite his tears. "Their names are probably something special," Marcus was telling the officers. "The big one acts like a Rex, but I think his real name is something stronger, like Duke or King. The girl dog, she's gentle like a Bella or a princess. And the middle one, he's smart, really smart, like a Max or a Scout." Sarah reached the gate just as the larger dog turned to look at her. She expected to see aggression, territorial behavior, something dangerous. Instead, she saw exhaustion, resignation, and just the tiniest spark of hope. The dog's tail moved once, weakly, as if asking permission to trust again. "Marcus," Sarah called, trying to keep her voice calm. "Come here, sweetheart." "No, Mama," Marcus said, his voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "If I leave, they'll take them away. And if they take them away, they'll make them go to sleep forever." The animal control officers looked uncomfortable. The taller one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, these dogs have been abandoned. It's our job to—" "I know what your job is," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "But can you give us a moment? Please?" The men stepped back, conferring quietly. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversation. Liability, protocol, supervisor. Meanwhile, Marcus hadn't moved from his spot among the dogs, his small hand resting on the scarred male's head. "They protected each other, Mama," Marcus said quietly. "During the storm, I watched them. The big one stood over the other 2, so they wouldn't get wet. The girl dog saved water for the others, even though she was thirsty. They're a family." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. She'd always been practical, careful, the kind of person who thought things through. But looking at her son, seeing the determination in his young face, she made a decision that would have seemed impossible just minutes before. "How long can you give us?" she asked the officers. "Ma'am, we have to follow procedure." "1 hour," she said. "Give me 1 hour to make some calls, please." The officers exchanged looks again. The shorter one shrugged. "We can come back after our next call. But ma'am, if these dogs are still here and unsecured—" "They won't be," Sarah said, though she had an idea how she would keep that promise. As the van pulled away, Sarah entered the yard carefully. The dogs watched her approach, but made no aggressive moves. The smallest female actually wagged her tail slightly, as if recognizing a fellow mother. "Marcus, we can't keep 3 large dogs," Sarah said gently, kneeling beside her son. "We don't have the space, the money for food and vet bills." "Then we find someone who does," Marcus said simply. "We can't let them die, Mama." They didn't do anything wrong. They were just left behind. Sarah looked at the dogs more closely. Despite their current condition, she could see they had once been well cared for. Their basic training was evident in how they sat, stayed, and watched. These weren't wild strays. These were someone's pets, abandoned and betrayed. She pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She called her estranged brother, David, who ran an animal rescue 2 towns over. "David? It's Sarah. I know we haven't talked since Dad's funeral, but I need help." While Sarah made calls, Marcus had found an old hose attached to the abandoned house. The water still worked, and he filled a rusty bucket he had discovered in the garage. The dogs drank desperately but carefully, still maintaining their strange courtesy of letting the smallest drink first. "You had a good owner once, didn't you?" Marcus asked them softly. "Someone who taught you to be gentle and kind." The largest dog, Marcus had decided to call him Duke until they learned his real name, made a sound that wasn't quite a bark, more like a conversational rumble. His scarred face looked less frightening now, more like a grandfather who'd lived through hard times but still remembered how to smile. Sarah's brother arrived 45 minutes later, his van loaded with supplies. David was tall and broad-shouldered, with the same dark eyes as Sarah, but with laugh lines she'd forgotten he had. "3 German shepherds?" he said, surveying the scene. "Sarah, do you know how hard these are to place? Everyone wants puppies, small dogs." "Then we'll find the few who don't," Sarah said. "David, look at them. Really look." David approached slowly, professionally, the way someone experienced with traumatized animals would. He held out his hand for the dogs to sniff, speaking in low, soothing tones. The middle dog, Scout, Marcus had decided, stepped forward first, sniffing carefully before giving David's hand a gentle lick. "They're trained," David said, surprise in his voice. "Really well trained. These aren't backyard dogs. Someone put time and money into these animals." He pulled out his phone and a small device, scanning each dog for a microchip. The machine beeped on the largest male. "Duke's registered as Kaiser," David read from his phone. "Registered to James Garrett. Last address update was 3 years ago." "Mr. Garrett lived here for 2 years," Sarah said. "He kept to himself, never caused trouble. Then 3 days ago, he just vanished, left everything behind." David scanned the female next. "Princess, actually named Luna. Same owner. The middle dog was last. And this one's called Ranger. All registered to Garrett, all with vaccination records up until 6 months ago." "6 months ago?" Sarah asked. David's expression darkened. "That's usually when the money troubles start. People stop taking their pets to the vet when they can't afford it themselves." Marcus had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. "Mister, Garrett lost his job at the factory. I heard him talking on the phone once, crying. He said something about having nowhere to go. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of desperation none of them had expected. Sarah felt her anger at the abandonment mixing with pity for a man who'd apparently lost everything. "We still can't leave them here," she said finally. David nodded. "I can take them to my rescue, but Sarah, I'll be honest. Dogs this age, this size, with no recent vet records. It could be months before anyone adopts them, if ever." "Then we buy time," Sarah said, surprising herself again with her determination. "Marcus and I will help. We'll visit them, help socialize them, make videos for social media, whatever it takes." "Mama," Marcus said suddenly, pointing toward the street. "Look." An elderly woman was approaching, walking slowly with a cane. She stopped at the gate, her weathered face creased with concern. "Excuse me," she called out. "Are you here about the dogs?" Sarah walked over to meet her. "Yes, we're trying to help them." "Did you know Mr. Garrett?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "James was my neighbor for 2 years. Those dogs were his whole world after his wife died. Kaiser especially. That dog saved his life once when James had a heart attack. Ran 3 blocks to get help." "Then why did he leave them?" Marcus asked, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. The elderly woman, she introduced herself as Mrs. Eleanor Watts, shook her head sadly. "He didn't want to. I saw him 3 nights ago, sitting in that yard with them for hours, crying like his heart was breaking. He'd lost everything. His job, his house was being foreclosed on. He was going to live in his car, but he couldn't take 3 large dogs with him. He could have found them homes," Sarah said, though her anger was fading. "He tried," Mrs. Watts said. "For weeks he tried. Posted online, asked neighbors, called rescues. Everyone said the same thing. 3 senior German shepherds were too much, too expensive, too risky. He was supposed to take them to the shelter himself, but I think he hoped if he left them here, someone would see them and care." Marcus walked over to where the dogs were now lying in the shade David had created with a tarp from his van. He was right. the boy said quietly. Someone did care. Mrs. Watts reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. James left this with me, said if anyone asked about the dogs to give it to them. I was going to call animal control myself tomorrow if no one came. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was $200 in worn bills and a letter written in shaky handwriting. To whoever finds them, their names are Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger. They're good dogs, the best dogs. Kaiser is 8, Luna is 7, and Ranger is 6. They're all trained. Kaiser was actually a service dog for my wife before she passed. Luna knows hand signals because my wife was partially deaf. Ranger can detect seizures. We found that out by accident when he alerted on a stranger in the park. I know leaving them was wrong. I know I'm a coward. But I've slept in my car for 3 nights now, and winter's coming. I can barely feed myself, let alone 3 dogs. The shelters won't take all 3 together, and separating them would kill them. They've been together since they were puppies. The money is all I have left. It's not much, but maybe it will buy them a few days of food. If you're reading this, please don't hate them for my failure. They didn't ask to be abandoned. They're still waiting for me to come back, and that breaks my heart more than losing my house ever could. Please, if there's any kindness in you, help them stay together. They're all each other has now. James Garrett. Sarah's hands were shaking as she finished reading. Marcus was crying openly now, his arms wrapped around Kaiser's neck. Even David, who'd seen hundreds of abandonment cases, had to turn away to wipe his eyes. We're not separating them, Marcus said fiercely. Never! They're a family. David knelt beside his nephew, this child he'd barely known, showing more compassion than most adults he'd met. Marcus, keeping them together will make it 3 times harder to find them a home. Then we'll try 3 times harder, Marcus said simply. Sarah looked at her brother, seeing in his eyes the same recognition she felt. This wasn't just about 3 abandoned dogs anymore. This was about teaching Marcus, and maybe reminding themselves, that sometimes doing the right thing meant doing the hardest thing. David, she said quietly, what would it take to keep them at your rescue indefinitely? Not just until they're adopted, but as long as it takes? David did quick mental math. Food, medical care, space, probably $500 a month minimum. More if they have health issues. Sarah thought about her savings account, the money she'd been putting aside for a vacation they probably wouldn't take anyway. I can cover 2 months. That gives us time to fundraise, find sponsors, maybe set up a GoFundMe. Sarah, you can't... Yes, I can, she interrupted. Marcus is right. They're a family, and families don't give up on each other. Mrs. Watts cleared her throat. I have some money saved. It's not much, but I could contribute $50 a month. James was a good neighbor. His dogs deserve better than this. David looked between the elderly, woman, his sister, and his young nephew. You're all crazy, you know that? Maybe, Sarah said with a small smile. But we're also right. As they discussed logistics, Marcus stayed with the dogs. He didn't see the van approaching until it was too late. But this wasn't animal control returning. It was a news van, and a young reporter was already approaching with her cameraman. Excuse me, the reporter called out. We got a call about abandoned dogs and a young boy who's trying to save them. Sarah's first instinct was to shield Marcus from the cameras, but David caught her arm. This could help, he whispered. Media attention might find them homes. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Park, approached carefully. Is it true that these dogs have been abandoned for 3 days? Marcus stood up, Kaiser rising shakily beside him. They weren't just abandoned, Marcus said, his young voice carrying surprising authority. They were left by someone who loved them but couldn't keep them. And now everyone wants to separate them or put them to sleep. But they're a family. Families should stay together. The camera was rolling as Marcus told the story, his simple words carrying more weight than any polished speech could. He talked about watching them share water, protect each other from the storm, maintain their dignity even while starving. Luna had moved to lean against Marcus's other side, while Ranger sat alert beside them, as if they understood they were being defended. People think German Shepherds are mean, Marcus continued, looking directly at the camera. But these dogs are gentle. They're trained. Kaiser saved his owner's life. Luna knows sign language. Ranger can detect seizures. They're not just dogs. They're heroes who got left behind. Jessica, the reporter, was visibly moved. "What do you hope will happen to them?" "Someone will see that they're special," Marcus said simply. "Someone with a big house and a big yard and an even bigger heart will want all three of them, together, forever." The interview would air that evening, but already Jessica was texting her producer. This was more than a simple abandonment story. This was about compassion, about a child seeing value where adults saw only burden. As the news crew prepared to leave, more neighbors had begun gathering. Word spread quickly in small communities, and the sight of the cameras had drawn attention. Some came to gawk, but others came with offerings. A bag of dog food, some old blankets, a few dollars pressed into Sarah's surprised hands. "I saw those dogs every day," one man admitted. "Always thought they looked well behaved. Should have checked on them sooner when I realized Garrett was gone." "We all should have," another neighbor added. But not everyone was supportive. Mr. Richard Thompson, who lived 3 houses down, pushed through the crowd with an angry expression. "Those dogs are a liability," he announced loudly. "What happens when they bite someone? When they get loose and attack? German shepherds are dangerous, especially in a pack." Kaiser, as if understanding the insult, stood up straighter, but instead of growling or showing aggression, he simply moved to stand between Mr. Thompson and Marcus, his stance protective but non-threatening. "They're not dangerous," Marcus said quietly. "You are. You're dangerous because you want to hurt them when they've done nothing wrong." The crowd fell silent. Mr. Thompson's face reddened. "Listen here, boy." "No, you listen," Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. "These dogs have been starving for 3 days. 3 days. And in all that time, did they break out? Did they attack anyone who walked by? Did they do anything except wait patiently for help?" David added. "I've been working with rescue animals for 15 years. These dogs are better trained and more stable than most pets I see from loving homes. The only danger here is from people who judge based on breed instead of behavior." Mrs. Watts spoke up from where she stood. "Richard Thompson, I remember when your son was lost in the woods 5 years ago. It was a German shepherd from the police department that found him. How quickly you forget." The man's face went from red to purple, but he had no response. He stomped away, muttering about property values and lawsuits. As the crowd began to disperse, each person taking with them a piece of the story to spread, Sarah realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about 3 dogs anymore. It had become about their community, about what kind of people they wanted to be. David had been examining each dog more carefully, checking their teeth, their joints, their overall health. "They're in better shape than I expected," he reported. "Dehydrated and hungry, but no obvious injuries or illnesses. With proper care, they could recover fully." "Then, let's get them proper care," Sarah said. But Kaiser suddenly stiffened, his ears perking up. He turned toward the street, a low whine escaping his throat. Luna and Ranger immediately joined him. All 3 dogs focused on something the humans couldn't see or hear yet. Then they heard it. A car engine, rough and misfiring, getting closer. An old sedan, held together with rust and hope, turned the corner. The dogs began pulling against their makeshift leashes, their tails wagging frantically. The car parked haphazardly, and a man got out. He was thin, unshaven, wearing clothes that had seen better days. But Marcus recognized him immediately. "Mr. Garrett," he whispered. James Garrett stood frozen, staring at his dogs. Kaiser broke free from David's gentle hold and ran, despite his weakness, straight to his owner. The man fell to his knees as all 3 dogs surrounded him, their joy evident in every wiggle and whine. "I'm sorry," James sobbed, his arms trying to embrace all 3 dogs at once. "I'm so sorry. I tried to stay away, tried to do the right thing, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave you." Sarah felt her anger rise. And he again, but Marcus caught her hand. "Look, Mama," he said softly. "Look at them." The reunion was undeniable. The dogs' transformation was immediate, their eyes brighter, their postures stronger, their tails never stopping. And James Garrett, despite his circumstances, was gentle with them, checking each for injuries, whispering apologies and promises. "Mr. Garrett," Sarah said carefully, "the letter said you were living in your car." The man looked up, shame written across his face. "I was. I am. But I couldn't. I drove by every day watching from a distance. When I saw the news van, I thought they were being taken away. I couldn't let them think I'd completely abandoned them. But you did abandon them, David said, though his voice was more sad than angry. I know, James said quietly. It was the worst thing I've ever done. But what choice did I have? I can't even feed myself properly. The shelters won't let me bring 3 dogs. I've been turned away from every assistance program because I won't give them up. But how could I? They're all I have left of my wife, of my life before everything fell apart. Marcus stepped forward. Maybe you don't have to give them up. Everyone turned to look at the 5-year-old boy, who had somehow become the voice of reason in this complicated situation. What do you mean, sweetheart? Sarah asked. Marcus's eyes were bright with an idea. Mister, Garrett knows how to take care of them. He loves them. They love him. He just needs help, right? So, we help him too, not just the dogs. David shook his head. Marcus, it's not that simple. There are laws, liability issues. But Mrs. Watts interrupted. The boy's right. James, my garage apartment has been empty since my son moved out. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. You could stay there with the dogs while you get back on your feet. James stared at her in shock. Eleanor, I couldn't... The rent? What rent? She said firmly. You'd be doing me a favor. That apartment needs someone living in it, and I need help with yard work and maintenance. Help I'd pay for, of course. Sarah and David exchanged glances. This was spiraling beyond anything they had imagined, but Marcus was smiling, his hand resting on Kaiser's head. It could work, Sarah said slowly. Mister, Garrett gets housing. The dogs stay with their owner. Mrs. Watts gets help she needs. And I can still visit them, Marcus added excitedly. James was crying again, but these were different tears. Why would you do this for me? I failed them. I failed everyone. No, Marcus said firmly. You made a mistake, but you came back. That's what matters. The afternoon sun was getting lower, casting long shadows across the abandoned yard that had nearly become a tragedy. Instead, it had become something else, a testament to the power of compassion, especially from a child who saw beyond the surface to the love underneath. But just as everyone began to believe in this impossible happy ending, a black SUV pulled up. A woman in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by 2 men who looked like lawyers. I'm looking for James Garrett, she announced, her voice cold and professional. James went pale. That's me, mister. Garrett, I'm Rebecca Morrison from Morrison Development. We need to discuss the matter of your outstanding debts and the foreclosure of this property. The hope that had been building shattered like glass. Kaiser moved protectively closer to James, sensing his owner's distress. I don't understand, James said weakly. The house is already foreclosed. I've lost everything. What more do you want? Rebecca Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. The house, yes. But there's also the matter of the valuable items you left behind. Items that technically belong to the bank now. What valuable items? David asked, stepping forward. The house is empty. The woman's eyes fixed on the 3 German shepherds. Those dogs are registered service and therapy animals. Trained animals of that caliber are worth thousands of dollars each. They're assets, Mr. Garrett. Assets you don't own anymore. The yard erupted in shocked voices, but Marcus's was the loudest. You can't take them? They're not things. They're family. Rebecca Morrison looked at the child with cold dismissal. Family doesn't pay debts, little boy. These animals are property and valuable property at that. We have buyers interested in trained German shepherds. Buyers? Sarah said, her voice dangerous. You mean you'd sell them? Separate them? That's business, the woman replied. Mister, Garrett should have thought about that before defaulting on his loans. James fell to his knees again, but this time in despair rather than joy. Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger surrounded him, as if trying to shield him from this new threat. Please, James begged, take anything else. Take my car, take whatever you want, but please don't take them. They're all I have left. Should have thought of that before, Rebecca said, gesturing to her associates. We have legal documents here. Either Mr. Garrett surrenders the dogs voluntarily, or we get a court order and take them anyway. The crowd that had dispersed was gathering again, drawn by the raised voices. Jessica, the reporter, who had been about to leave, quickly got her cameraman filming again. "This is happening live," she said into her microphone. "A development company is attempting to seize 3 German shepherds as payment for debt." Rebecca Morrison noticed the camera, and her expression tightened. "Turn that off. This is a private legal matter." "It's a public street," Jessica replied, "and this is news." Marcus had been quiet, his young mind working through the problem. Then he did something no one expected. He walked up to Rebecca Morrison and looked her straight in the eye. "How much?" he asked. "Excuse me? How much money does Mr. Garrett owe you?" The woman laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "More than a little boy could understand. $30,000. The crowd gasped. It might as well have been $1 million to most of them, but Marcus didn't flinch. "If we raise the money, will you leave them alone?" "Marcus," Sarah said gently. "Sweetheart, that's too much." But the boy wasn't listening. He turned to the camera, to Jessica, who was broadcasting live. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 5 years old, and I'm asking everyone watching to help save Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger. They're hero dogs who save people's lives. Their owner lost his job and his house, but he loves them. Please, if everyone just gives a little bit, we can save them." Rebecca Morrison scoffed. "You think you can raise $30,000? You have 72 hours before the court order goes through. Good luck, little boy." As her SUV pulled away, the yard fell silent, except for the sound of James Garrett's quiet sobs and the whining of 3 dogs who didn't understand why their owner was so sad. But Marcus wasn't defeated. He looked at the camera again, then at the gathering crowd, then at his mother. 72 hours, he said with determination that seemed impossible in someone so young. "We can do this." Sarah knelt beside her son, seeing in his eyes the same fire she'd seen when he first stood between the dogs and animal control. "Marcus, $30,000. "Mama," he interrupted, "you always told me that when something is right, it doesn't matter if it's hard." "This is right," David cleared his throat. "The kid's got a point. And that news broadcast is already going viral. Jessica, how many viewers?" The reporter checked her phone. 20,000 and climbing. The comments are pouring in. People are already asking how to help. Mrs. Watts stepped forward. "I have 5,000 in savings. It was for my funeral, but I'd rather use it to save lives than end one." "Eleanor, no," James protested, but she waved him off. "Hush. What good is money in the ground?" Others in the crowd began speaking up. $5 here, 20 there. Someone mentioned a cousin who ran a charity. Another talked about their church's emergency fund. But it was what happened next that truly changed everything. Kaiser, the scarred German shepherd who had once saved James's life, walked over to Marcus. The dog sat down in front of the boy and raised his paw, placing it gently on Marcus's small shoulder. It was as if the dog was saying, "We believe in you." The cameraman zoomed in on that moment, a scared child and a scarred dog, both refusing to give up. That image would spread across the internet faster than anyone could have imagined, becoming a symbol of hope in a world that often seemed hopeless. 72 hours, Marcus repeated, his hand resting on Kaiser's head. "We're going to save them. All of them. Even Mr. Garrett." As the sun began to set on that extraordinary day, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The story of 3 abandoned German shepherds and the boy who refused to let them be separated was about to become something much bigger than anyone imagined. But that night, as Sarah tucked Marcus into bed, he asked a question that would haunt her. "Mama, what if we can't raise enough money?" She didn't have an answer, but looking at her son's determined face, she knew they had to try. Because sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight even when you might lose. The clock had started ticking. 72 hours to raise $30,000. 72 hours to save 3 dogs and the man who loved them. 72 hours to prove that compassion could triumph over corporate greed. The impossible had become necessary, and a 5-year-old boy was leading the charge. The first 24 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, social media posts, and unexpected visitors. Marcus had barely slept, his mind racing with ideas to save Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger. By morning, their story had been shared over 100,000 times, but the donation counter Jessica had helped them set up showed only $3,847. "It's not enough," Sarah said quietly, staring at her phone over breakfast. "At this rate, we'll never make it." Marcus pushed his cereal around his bowl, watching the milk swirl. "Mister, Garrett stayed in Mrs. Watts's garage last night with the dogs. He said Kaiser wouldn't stop pacing, like he knows something bad is coming." The doorbell rang before Sarah could respond. David stood on their porch, but he wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman in her 60s, wearing a worn military jacket covered in patches. "Sarah, Marcus, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes, retired," David said. She saw the broadcast. The woman's eyes were sharp, missing nothing as she studied Marcus. "You're the boy who stood up to those animal control officers?" Marcus nodded, suddenly shy. "I drove 3 hours to get here," Colonel Hayes said. "Because that dog, Kaiser, I trained him." The room went silent. Marcus's eyes widened. "You knew Kaiser before?" Patricia nodded, her weathered face softening. 8 years ago, I was running a service dog program for veterans. Kaiser was my star pupil. But more than that, he saved my life." She pulled out a faded photograph from her wallet. A younger Kaiser stood proud in a service vest beside a woman in a wheelchair. "That's my daughter, Emily. She lost her legs in Afghanistan. Kaiser was supposed to be her service dog." "What happened?" Sarah asked gently. Patricia's voice grew thick. "Emily took her own life 2 years into Kaiser's training. The depression was too much. Kaiser found her. He stayed with her for 6 hours, wouldn't let anyone near her until I arrived." She wiped her eyes. "I couldn't keep him after that. Too many memories. James Garrett and his wife adopted him, promised to continue his service work." Marcus stood up and walked to Patricia, taking her hand in his small one. "Kaiser is still a hero. He saved Mr. Garrett when he had a heart attack." Patricia squeezed his hand. "I know. I've been following his story, which is why I'm here." She pulled out a check. $10,000. It's everything I have, but Kaiser deserves it." Sarah gasped. "We can't take your life savings." "You can and you will," Patricia said firmly, "because this isn't just about money. It's about honor. Those dogs served people their entire lives. Now people need to serve them." The donation counter jumped to $13,847. They were getting closer, but still so far from their goal. Marcus had an idea. "Colonel Hayes, would you come with me to see Kaiser? Maybe if people saw you with him, heard your story." 20 minutes later, they were in Mrs. Watts's backyard where James had set up a temporary shelter for the dogs. The moment Kaiser saw Patricia, his entire body changed. His ears perked forward, his tail began wagging in a specific pattern, and he let out a sound that was part bark, part cry. "Hello, soldier," Patricia whispered, kneeling despite her obvious joint pain. Kaiser rushed to her, but stopped just short, sitting perfectly as trained. "At ease, boy." The dam broke. Kaiser launched himself into Patricia's arms, 8 years of professional training, forgotten in the joy of reunion. Luna and Ranger watched with interest, sensing this was someone special. James Garrett stood in the doorway of the garage apartment, looking overwhelmed. "You're Colonel Hayes?" Kaiser's original trainer. Patricia stood, Kaiser glued to her side. "Mr. Garrett, I owe you a debt. You gave Kaiser a home when I couldn't. You loved him when I was too broken to." "He saved me," James said simply. "After my wife died, after I lost everything, he was the reason I got up each morning." Marcus had been recording everything on Sarah's phone. "Can I put this online? People need to see this." Within an hour, the reunion video had 50,000 views. The donation counter climbed to $16,232. But they were running out of time. 48 hours left. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A long black car pulled up to Mrs. Watts's house. An elderly man stepped out, leaning heavily on a cane. He was dressed in an expensive suit, but his eyes were kind. "I'm looking for the boy," he said, "the one trying to save the dogs." Marcus stepped forward, flanked protectively by Sarah and David. "I'm Marcus." The man studied him for a long moment. "My name is Walter Brennan. 60 years ago, I was Marcus too. Different Marcus, different dogs, but the same story." He moved slowly to a bench in Mrs. Watts's yard, gesturing for them to join him. "When I was 7, my father lost his farm in the Depression. We had 2 dogs, hunting hounds that were his pride and joy. The bank came to take them, said they were assets." His voice grew distant with memory. "I stood in front of those bank men just like you stood in front of animal control. But I didn't have the internet. I didn't have a community. They took our dogs, and my father never recovered. Marcus moved closer to the old man. What happened to the dogs? I don't know, Walter admitted, but I spent my whole life wondering. It drove me to become successful, to never be powerless again. I built a company, made millions, but I never forgot those dogs. He pulled out his checkbook. How much do you need? 30,000 total, Sarah said. We have about 16,000. Walter began writing. I'm giving you 20,000. Everyone gasped. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. But that's more than we need. The extra is for their care, Walter said, handing the check to Sarah. And for you, young man. He looked at Marcus seriously. You did what I couldn't. You stood up and fought back. You gave an old man closure he didn't know he needed. As Walter's car pulled away, the yard erupted in celebration. They had done it. They had raised more than enough. The dogs were safe. But their joy was short-lived. Rebecca Morrison arrived an hour later, flanked by 2 security guards and a sheriff's deputy. I hear you think you've won, she said coldly. Sarah held up her phone, showing the donation total of $36,232. We have the money, more than enough. Rebecca's smile was cruel. Oh, but you don't understand. The debt has interest, daily compounding interest. As of today, mister, Garrett owes $33,000. By tomorrow, it will be $34,000. You can't possibly keep up. Marcus felt his world crashing down. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, little boy, Rebecca said. Besides, we've found buyers for the dogs. A security company wants Kaiser, a therapy program wants Luna, and Ranger is going to a police department 3 states away. They'll be separated within the week. No! James cried out, but the security guard stepped forward. We're taking the dogs now, Rebecca announced. The sheriff is here to ensure compliance. The sheriff, a young man who looked uncomfortable, stepped forward. Mr. Garrett, I have a court order. But before he could finish, something extraordinary happened. Cars began arriving, dozens of them. People Marcus had never seen before were pulling up, getting out, surrounding the yard. What's happening? Sarah whispered. Jessica the reporter appeared, breathless from running. Your story went national. These people drove from all over the state. They're here to help. A man in a business suit stepped forward. I'm attorney Michael Chen, no relation, but I saw what you're doing for these dogs. Mrs. Morrison, I've reviewed the loan documents. The interest clause you're citing is illegal under state usury laws. Rebecca's face paled. You can't. I can and I am, Michael continued. I'm representing Mr. Garrett pro bono. We're challenging the entire foreclosure. More people pushed forward. A woman in scrubs said, I'm Dr. Jennifer Martinez. I run a veterans therapy program. We'll sponsor all 3 dogs and Mr. Garrett as a handler. That makes them working animals protected under different laws. A man in a construction. Company shirt added, I'm offering Mr. Garrett a job, full-time with benefits, starting immediately. The crowd grew larger. Teachers, nurses, shop owners, even children with their piggy banks. Each person had come because of Marcus, because a 5-year-old boy had reminded them that fighting for what's right matters. Rebecca Morrison looked around, realizing she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, it is, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see the mayor walking through the crowd, followed by news crews from 3 different stations. Mrs. Morrison, the mayor said loudly, ensuring the cameras caught every word. The city council held an emergency meeting. We're declaring Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger as community heritage animals, protected under Municipal Statute 247. They cannot be seized, sold, or separated. The crowd erupted in cheers. Marcus felt himself being lifted onto someone's shoulders. It was Colonel Hayes, stronger than her age suggested. You did it, soldier, she said to Marcus. You saved them all. But Marcus wasn't looking at the celebrating crowd. He was watching James Garrett, who was on his knees with his 3 dogs, all of them pressed against him in a group hug that seemed to exclude the rest of the world. Rebecca Morrison retreated to her SUV, but not before issuing one last threat. This isn't over. I'll find another way. Michael Chen stepped in front of her. Actually, it is over. You see, while you were threatening a child and trying to steal service dogs, I did some research. Your company has been illegally seizing assets from foreclosed properties for years. The state attorney general is very interested in opening an investigation." Rebecca's face went white. Without another word, she got in her SUV and drove away, the security guards and sheriff following, leaving nothing but dust and defeated ambitions. As the crowd began to disperse, each person stopping to pet the dogs or shake Marcus's hand, something beautiful happened. Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger began performing their old service dog demonstrations, as if they knew they were safe and wanted to thank everyone. Kaiser showed his cardiac alert training, lying down and barking when Colonel Hayes pretended to have chest pains. Luna responded to hand signals, even though no one had used them with her in months. Ranger demonstrated his seizure detection abilities, alerting to subtle chemical changes that most humans couldn't detect. "They remember everything," Patricia said in wonder. "All their training, all their purpose. They just needed to feel safe enough to show it." As the sun began to set on the second day, Marcus sat on Mrs. Watts's porch with all 3 dogs around him. James was inside, calling his new employer to discuss start dates. Sarah was helping David coordinate with Dr. Martinez about the therapy program sponsorship. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said to the dogs. "Everyone thinks I saved you. But really, you saved Mr. Garrett, and he saved you by loving you enough to come back. And Mrs. Watts saved all of us by offering her apartment. And Colonel Hayes saved us with her money. And Mr. Brennan saved us with his check. And all those people saved us by showing up." Kaiser placed his big head on Marcus's lap, his scarred face peaceful in the dying light. "I guess," Marcus continued, his 5-year-old wisdom shining through, "everybody saves everybody when we all try together." But the story wasn't over. Not quite. 3 days later, after the immediate danger had passed and life was beginning to settle into a new routine, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. He was helping James clean out the last of the abandoned house, looking for any of the dog's old toys or belongings, when he found a box hidden in the attic. Inside were photographs, documents, and a letter addressed to whoever finds this. "Mr. Garrett," Marcus called, "you need to see this." James climbed the ladder, the dogs waiting anxiously below. When he saw the box, his face went pale. "That's not mine. That must have belonged to the previous owner." They opened the letter together. "My name is Robert Morrison," Marcus read aloud, his reading skills advanced for his age. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead, and my daughter Rebecca has inherited my company." James gasped. "Rebecca Morrison's father owned this house?" Marcus continued reading. "I bought this house as a shelter, a place to hide money I stole from my own company. $30,000 is buried in the backyard, under the oak tree. I was going to retrieve it and disappear, but my cancer came back. Rebecca doesn't know about this house or the money. She's become cruel, like I taught her to be. I regret that most of all." They stared at each other in shock. James grabbed a shovel, and within an hour they had found a waterproof container with exactly $30,000 in cash. "This is what she was really after," James whispered. "She didn't care about the dogs. She knew her father had hidden money somewhere on this property." Marcus's eyes were wide. "But she doesn't know we found it." "What do we do?" James asked. "Technically, this money belongs to the people her company stole from," Marcus said firmly. "We should give it back to the community." And that's exactly what they did. The money was donated to start the Marcus and Kaiser Foundation, a fund to help families keep their pets during financial hardship. The story made national news again, this time focusing on how corruption was exposed by a child's pure intention to save 3 dogs. Rebecca Morrison's company was investigated, dozens of illegally seized assets were returned to their rightful owners, and Rebecca herself faced criminal charges. The last anyone heard, she was performing community service at an animal shelter, learning the hard way about compassion she had never shown others. A month later, Marcus stood in front of his school, giving a presentation about his summer. Behind him sat Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger, all wearing their new therapy dog vests. "Sometimes bad things happen," Marcus told his classmates. "Mr. Garrett lost his job and his house. The dogs lost their home. But when bad things happen, we can choose to help each other or hurt each other. Helping is always better." One child raised her hand. Were you scared when you stood up to the adults? Marcus thought about it. Yeah, I was really scared. But Kaiser was more scared. Luna was more scared. Ranger was more scared. Mr. Garrett was the most scared. So I had to be brave for them. His teacher, Mrs. Robinson, had tears in her eyes. Marcus, what you did was extraordinary. No, Marcus said, shaking his head. What I did was ordinary. I just saw someone who needed help and helped. If everyone did that, it would be ordinary. That's what should be extraordinary, that more people don't help. After the presentation, Marcus walked home with his mother, the 3 dogs now officially certified as community therapy animals, allowed to go anywhere with their new handler team of James and Marcus. Mama, Marcus said, do you think there are other dogs out there like Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger? Other families being separated? Sarah knew where this was going. Her son had tasted justice and wanted more. Probably, sweetheart. Then we need to help them too. And they did. The Marcus and Kaiser Foundation grew from a local fund to a national organization. Marcus became the youngest person ever to address Congress about animal welfare and family preservation during economic hardship. His simple words, "Families include furry members too," became a rallying cry for change. James Garrett, with his new job in stable housing, became a certified therapy dog handler. He and the 3 dogs visited hospitals, schools, and nursing homes. Kaiser's cardiac alert training saved 3 more lives. Luna's gentle presence helped dozens of children with autism learn to communicate. Ranger's seizure detection prevented countless medical emergencies. Colonel Patricia Hayes moved to town, unable to stay away from Kaiser any longer. She started a service dog training program with James, teaching veterans how to train their own companions. The abandoned house was purchased by the city and turned into the Hayes Garrett Service Dog Academy. Mrs. Watts, energized by having tenants who cared for her property and kept her company, lived another 10 happy years, always saying that saving those dogs had saved her from loneliness. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Marcus himself. The shy 5-year-old who had first peered through a fence at 3 abandoned dogs grew into a confident young advocate. By age 10, he had helped save over 1,000 animals and reunited dozens of families with pets they thought they'd lost forever. Years later, when Marcus was graduating from high school as valedictorian, he stood at the podium with an elderly Kaiser by his side. The old dog was gray-muzzled now, moving slowly but still dignified. 13 years ago, Marcus began his speech, I saw 3 dogs abandoned in a yard. Everyone else saw a problem. I saw a family that needed help. That moment taught me that compassion isn't about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's right, especially when it's hard. He looked down at Kaiser, who was gazing up at him with those same intelligent eyes, now clouded with age but still full of love. Kaiser taught me that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have 4 legs and scarred faces. Sometimes they're elderly neighbors who open their homes. Sometimes they're lawyers who work for free, or reporters who share important stories, or communities that come together to fight injustice. The audience was silent, many wiping away tears. But mostly, Marcus continued, heroes are ordinary people who see something wrong and decide to make it right. Every single one of you has that power. The question is, will you use it? As Marcus left the stage to thunderous applause, Kaiser walking slowly beside him, no one could have imagined that this was the same scared, hungry dog who had been days away from euthanasia, or that the confident young man beside him was the same small boy who had pushed a peanut butter sandwich through a fence. James Garrett, now married to Dr. Martinez, with 2 adopted children of their own, stood in the audience with Luna and Ranger, both elderly but still inseparable. He often thought about that terrible day when he'd abandoned them, the worst mistake of his life that had somehow led to the best thing that ever happened to him, a community that refused to let him fail. The Marcus and Kaiser Foundation had helped thousands of families keep their pets during hard times. Laws had been changed to protect animals from being seized as assets. Service dog programs had been expanded nationwide, all because a 5-year-old boy had looked at 3 abandoned German shepherds and seen not dangerous animals, but souls deserving of love. On Kaiser's last day, 5 years after that graduation speech, Marcus was 23 and in veterinary school. He'd rushed home when James called to say Kaiser was fading. The old dog was lying in the same yard where Marcus had first seen him, but now it was transformed into a beautiful garden. Luna and Ranger had passed peacefully 2 years before, within days of each other, as bonded pairs often do. Kaiser was waiting. Marcus knew he'd been waiting to say goodbye. "Hey, buddy," Marcus whispered, lying down beside the dog on the soft grass. "It's okay. You can go." Kaiser's tail moved once, that same weak wag from 13 years ago that had started everything. He pressed his great head against Marcus's chest one last time, took a deep breath, and was still. Marcus held him as the sun set, remembering the scared, scarred dog who had taught him about courage. James sat beside them, Patricia on the other side, all of them saying goodbye to a hero who had never worn a uniform but had served more faithfully than most. The news of Kaiser's passing made headlines nationwide. Thousands of people shared their stories of how Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger's story had inspired them to adopt, to foster, to help. The abandoned yard where it all began was turned into a memorial garden with a statue of a small boy and 3 dogs and a plaque that read, "Love sees no breed, no scars, no abandonment, only souls worth saving," in memory of Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger, and the boy who refused to give up, Marcus Chen and the 3 heroes. But the story doesn't end with sadness, because even as Marcus grieved Kaiser's loss, he was already working on his next mission. In veterinary school, he was developing programs to provide free medical care for pets of homeless individuals. He was lobbying for laws to protect animals during natural disasters. He was teaching other children that their voices, no matter how small, could change the world. And somewhere, in another town, another child was looking through another fence at another abandoned dog, remembering the story of Marcus and Kaiser and finding the courage to act. Because that's how change really happens. Not in grand gestures or sudden revolutions, but in small acts of kindness that ripple outward, touching lives in ways we never imagined. 1 child, 3 dogs, and a community that chose compassion over convenience. Marcus often thought about that first day, standing at the fence, making the choice to help. He couldn't have known it would change his life, save multiple lives, and inspire thousands. He only knew that 3 dogs were hungry and alone, and he had a peanut butter sandwich. Sometimes, that's all heroism is, sharing what little you have with someone who has nothing. The Marcus and Kaiser Foundation continues to this day, run by an adult Marcus who never forgot the lessons learned from 3 abandoned German shepherds. Every year on the anniversary of that first day, Marcus returns to the memorial garden with his own children, telling them the story of how their father learned that love is stronger than law. Compassion is more powerful than corporations, and sometimes the smallest among us can move mountains. His daughter, 5 years old just like Marcus was, always asks the same question. "Daddy, would you do it again?" And Marcus always gives the same answer, every single time. Because some choices define us. Some moments matter more than others. And sometimes 3 abandoned dogs in an empty yard can teach the whole world about love. As Marcus tells his children, remember, you're never too small to make a difference. You're never too young to stand up for what's right. And you're never alone when you choose to help others. The ripples continue to spread. In schools across the country, children learn about the Marcus Protocol, a series of steps to take when they see an animal in distress. Thousands of dogs have been saved, thousands of families kept together, all because one 5-year-old boy looked at 3 German shepherds and saw not a problem to be solved, but lives to be saved. And in the end, that's what matters. Not the money raised, not the laws changed, not even the thousands helped. What matters is that when faced with a choice between walking away and standing up, a small boy chose to stand. And 3 dogs, scarred and scared and abandoned, chose to trust one more time. Together, they proved that love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. It's pushing a sandwich through a fence. It's opening your garage apartment to strangers. It's driving 3 hours to donate your life savings. It's showing up when showing up is all you can do. The story of Marcus, Kaiser, Luna, and Ranger reminds us that heroes aren't born. They're made in moments of decision. When we choose others over ourselves, when we choose difficult over easy, when we choose love over fear. Every abandoned dog waiting in a shelter is Kaiser. Every child with a kind heart is Marcus. Every community has the power to be transformative. We just have to choose. So the next time you see someone or something in need, remember the boy at the fence with the peanut butter sandwich. Remember the 3 German shepherds who just needed someone to see their worth. Remember that small acts of kindness can change the world, because they can. They do. They will. One dog, one child, one choice at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of compassion. Subscribe for more incredible stories of courage, hope, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Comment below and tell us about a time when you stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves, or when an animal changed your life. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done if you found those 3 German shepherds? Your story might inspire the next person to choose love over indifference, action over apathy, and hope over despair. Remember, you're never too small to make a difference, and it's never too late to be someone's hero.